Thank you very much, Monique, and the pleasure is all mine. Thank you to all of you for coming, and thanks to everyone who is watching this by web streaming, because it's very important for us to reach out using this, the NGI Forum, as a key platform for our plans. I'm going to tell you about our vision, but I was really fascinated by the vision coming from Porto. So, Vice Mayor, thank you very much. This is actually the second time in less than 6 months that Porto has hosted important events linked directly to our activities with regard to the future of internet technologies and the use of technologies for growth and well-being in the economy and society. We had a conference several months ago with our important Fireware platform, which, like NGI, is removed from the Commission. It's run independently, and we hope that this is the case also for NGI, as the Commission continues to be a key supporter. And I thought the best thing that I could do to tell you about our vision for the next generation internet, for our vision for the future, is first of all just to tell you a little bit about what happened yesterday before we start looking to the future. Yesterday, the President of the European Commission gave his annual State of the Union speech. In his case, it will be his last one, as we have elections next year and then a new Commission will be appointed. But within that, in stating his personal vision, as well as the Commission's view on what we need to do together with the Member States and with local communities going forward, one of the interesting things that the President said very clearly was that we can only go forward if we are united, and only a strong and unified Europe can master the challenges of global digitization. Yes, he did say that. He focused particularly on digitization and on the importance of digital technologies as a challenge, but also as an opportunity. What's more, the President said in the European Parliament, and I'm quoting now, it's the easiest thing to do, that it is because of our single market, the largest in the world, that we can set standards for big data, artificial intelligence, and automation. And because of that single market, that we are able to uphold European values, rights, and identities in doing so. And that is a clear indication of what is motivating us with the next generation internet. It is to actually set the standards to help you, the communities who know how to do this and who understand the technologies, to work together to build the next generation internet with those European values, rights, and identities at the heart. And why? Because the President's speech was very much even in a wider context, in which he spoke about the hour of European sovereignty. This is the time for Europe to assert its own sovereignty and to take leadership at a time when other partners in the world are pulling back from their international role or taking a much more negative and aggressive attitude towards partners and partnership. This is something where we actually have an obligation, but of course we also have a strong interest. And what I hope that we will get from today's forum is that you will see how those principles, which are meaningful and important, do actually have to translate into some very concrete things in terms of research, innovation, and implementation in the internet, so that we are looking at a future in which we have developed the internet, but in which we have helped you and worked together to embed some key principles into the way that the internet functions, particularly vis-a-vis the individual citizen, but also empowers the citizen and groups and communities, whether it is a city such as Porto or a small village in a rural area or a group of like-minded social activists, or many other examples I could give, to actually harness the internet rather than being controlled by the internet environment. So that's an eye-opener. That's what I wanted to start with. And then when we think about that idea of leadership, it's actually very important across many things. As the President emphasized yesterday, it's very important with regard to our security union, which again has very direct and concrete implications for our work in digital technologies. Also, we need leadership in completing the digital single market to help us to actually achieve some of our goals and to create the conditions in which we have one single European digital space where that European internet can have scale, can have success, and can become a demonstrator for the rest of the world. So yesterday, the Commission also announced some of the measures which we are putting in place or proposing to put in place to complete our vision. On one side, on security. Very important, however, for the operation of the Internet, where we are proposing new rules with regard to illegal and particularly to terrorist content on the Internet. The Commission will propose that platforms will have to take that content down within 1 hour of being notified and ordered to do so by a competent national authority. The mechanisms in place will, of course, have to have safeguards. There will be an appeal mechanism in order to ensure, particularly for content providers, that they are not wrongly or unfairly subject to such notices. There will also be greater cooperation, and that in itself will involve a greater use and understanding of the Internet, both the positive but also, of course, the negative elements. So that's another of the tools which we are putting in place to, as it were, and I use this word very carefully, control the Internet environment. But this is crucial, what I'm going to say next. Rules and regulations can only go so far. We have an obligation as regulators to do some of that. But you know better than I do, no doubt, that particularly in the context of the Internet and Internet technologies, rules will never be able to catch up with the technology itself. We have to have tools that anticipate, that work on behalf of the individual, and that have design principles for which you will be responsible, which will allow us to ensure that the Internet is working for the good of society and, of course, for the good of the individual. That requires involvement of all stakeholders, and it also involves bottom-up creation. Again, an essential element to what we're doing here in the NGI community. Because Internet has already transformed our society. That's a truism. But what we actually have to do is how we can now try and use that power of transformation in a positive way. It allows people to get informed, it transforms the way we work, and of course it can increase significantly the productivity of the economy as well as the benefits for society. Some of the applications, again, that Felipe spoke about in Porto, whether it's traffic lights or databases with the use of technologies for the environment, any of those and more examples are exactly the sort of things that we have to do in order to ensure that we are harnessing the Internet. So the potential is enormous, you know that. The potential for improved learning, for better social inclusion, for economic growth, better healthcare, better transport, better environment, and public services. That is something which you are, I'm sure, convinced of. But of course, it can also come with serious concerns and risks about individuals' privacy, with regard to security of data, with regard also to dominant positions for particular operators, the lock-in of users' data, the lock-in of businesses' data and their processes, the fact that the data, which in some cases is gaining significantly in value compared to the actual product or service, that is somehow lost or having to be shared by somebody else when a person who has generated and done the work for that value data to be created is not being recompensed properly. So those are issues which we have to address, and as I've said, in the DSM, including what was announced yesterday, we are, of course, continuing to make those proposals where regulation is the way forward. Another announcement yesterday, a proposal made by the Commission, which had already been signalled but the work is now ready, would be for, in the context of our cyber security policy, to have a cyber security competence centre at European level, which will coordinate and work with the experts in cybersecurity at national level to ensure that we are at the forefront of cyber technologies, that it's being shared, learnt about, but also that we are better coordinated in terms of cyber technologies. But the NGI has to come in again and fill that big gap that rules certainly can never fill in terms of creating the environment for the NGI. I've said it before and I'm going to say it again. We've built or have put on the place the proposals for a solid regulatory framework, but now we have to put in place the next generation internet itself. That is why you are here, that is why you are listening in online today through the video streaming. Because we need groundbreaking research and innovation. We need partnerships to go hand in hand and to benefit from the regulatory framework of the digital single market. We need to put the human at the center of everything that is done with regard to the technology of the future internet. And this is where I've said that the vision quickly translates into very concrete and real things with regard to privacy technologies, personal data spaces, personal data lockers, whatever you want to call them. The use of AI and of algorithms by the individual, or to protect and anticipate in a way that the user controls their needs and their wishes when they expose themselves to an internet environment. For example, in anticipating what sort of privacy levels am I likely to want when I go visit this particular page, given its nature, given whatever AI can help me to anticipate about that particular web environment. And also in relation to the rules, but also the way of working with others. We are putting, in some cases, strong emphasis on codes of conduct, working with providers of cloud services with regard to data protection, working with platforms with regard to online content, where because of what we commonly believe in, we should be able to agree what are a set of practices in any given environment. And of course then the rules would only come in behind that if it is patently not working, if there are risks to the individual or risks to society that are not being dealt with adequately and comprehensively in that more flexible environment which is necessary for the internet of today. Because if we act according to our values, we can actually lower the level of regulation and increase innovation and increase Europe's leadership in terms of new technologies. So that is what a lot of our research and innovation work has already been about. Already, we have been working under the current research and innovation programs, Horizon 2020. And as you will hear today, we will continue to increase over the next 2 years the level of expenditure, but also the exposure to a wider and wider community of researchers, startups, internet activists, and those with a place in our NGI vision. And that will continue even further under what will be the replacement research and innovation program, Horizon Europe, under our next financial program, which President Juncker also referred to yesterday. But first of all, just very briefly on Horizon 2020, which many of you are familiar with, and in which actually this process is funded. The community, the support initiatives that we have are an important part of the NGI. What is different from some of the other technology research innovation that we've done is that we spent an awful lot of our early seed money not in immediately commissioning detailed technical research, but actually creating the support framework, the CSAs that Monique and others represent here today, to actually reach out to the community and start the community building. But already, of course, we've gone beyond the concept stage. We are in this phase of building communities, but we're already calling for projects to enter into some of the detailed technological areas where we need to implement a human-centric internet. So working with individual researchers, high-tech startups, etc., we are spending 270 million euros on funding dedicated to NGI in different technology areas, on immersive technologies, artificial intelligence, IoT applications, social media, language technologies, digital learning, and of course, open internet applications. So that is something which you'll be hearing more about today, and where, of course, we are trying to make as much information available as possible, but also to get as much input as possible from you and others like you in order to actually design the specific work programs so that that research is actually looking at the right things. We are working more and more through cascading grants and mechanisms for finance which are more flexible and which are more adapted to the type of communities that we want to work with. We still rely to a significant extent to what I would say are traditional or classic research partners, particularly in the research institutes and universities. That relationship will continue. It is vital for us. But we also must address the issue where we are not through even the bureaucracy of our funding mechanisms, not addressing properly the role that can be played by small startups, by individuals with significant technological potential, but who are not either attracted, used to, or actually able to work through the traditional research and funding mechanisms. And also because we, in what is sometimes called the Brussels bubble, are not necessarily well placed to reach out to the small communities or the communities that are not anywhere near Brussels, for example in Porto or elsewhere, and to use agents who are much more in touch with those research communities now and in the future. So we will be continuing to look at innovative and flexible funding mechanisms to make sure that we do attract and involve all of the stakeholders that we think that can contribute to the implementation of the NGI. And then after Horizon 2020 is, as I've said, the Horizon Europe programme. That is a funding programme from 2021 to 2028, and the Next Generation Internet will be a part of that permanently, as the research programming that we've already put on the table shows. We want to bring research and innovation across throughout the whole value chain, from network and service infrastructures all the way up to internet applications and services. As the Deputy Mayor said, a lot of this isn't going to be practical unless we're also at the same time working on those infrastructures, working on connectivity, and actually helping local communities to build, in some cases, to finance the fibre or the Wi-Fi access points, which is exactly the sort of spending that the Commission is just now putting in place. But we believe that it is essential to do all of this in a coherent and integrated way. So I spoke myself about leadership. The leadership is at the European Union level. The Commission also wants to show leadership, but we actually can't do that unless we are listening to you and unless you are guiding us. So it's a much more flat relationship, I think, than the idea of leadership would suggest. We do have a mandate with regard to personal data protection. We have a mandate with regard to improving the economic and social well-being of all EU citizens. But to actually implement those, we need the technologists involved in internet technologies to actually achieve them, to ensure openness. And openness is not just a word. I don't know how many software programmers there are in the room, but open source and open access technologies are actually a crucial element to some of the things that we want to achieve across the spectrum, from cloud technologies through to those internet applications and services. So those ambitions, I think, we hope, are shared, and also the responsibility or the demands which that places on you are hopefully also understood. So this forum today and the platform that we are building of NGI stakeholders is essential for us to achieve our common objectives. The forum will allow you this afternoon and this morning to hear about some of the things that we would like to do, but also it provides us to hear from you about the issues that we must address and perhaps also how we must address them. So I encourage you to participate actively, and also, of course, to keep contacts beyond today, to make sure that you are plugged into the network, to make sure that you are aware of what the CSAs are doing and how you can be a part of their work, and then continue to talk to those people, organizations and groups that you have contact with, so that you can then relay the information that they have, the knowledge, but also the wishes that they have about how can we use technology to empower the individual. How can we build a next generation internet that better reflects the role of the individual and the rights of the individual, making that human-centric goal something very tangible, concrete, and we believe realizable. So thank you very much for your time. I look forward to an excellent day's discussion, and thank you once again to Porto for hosting this today.